One more second. Okay, we are on the show. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening, everyone, to the Speak Your Truth with Mark Ross podcast. I am your host, Mark Ross, and with me tonight is Miss Lisa Richardson.
Good evening.
Lisa, thank you. You are the senior care advisor and Director of Community Relations for Sunrise Meadows Senior Living Facility in Brookfield, Wisconsin. Correct?
I am, you bet.
I've been wanting to ask, you have two positions at your job. Why is that?
Well, one was a senior care advisor before I got to Sunrise Meadows,
Oh,
and I was with the nation's oldest and largest placement firm for about close to 4.5 years. And overall, I have 17 years experience in senior living. And so I came to Sunrise Meadows as from a senior advisor to more of a director of community relations and sales and marketing. And when you think of senior living and you think of sales and marketing, that's
mm,
kind of, for me, almost an incorrect term because I still stay in contact with the families and the residents once they move in. And I have a very, very close relationship and follow through once someone moves into our community.
nice, nice. So, before we get started, ladies and gentlemen, and for those that are coming on to the show, the conversation here is related to elder care and the pros and cons of elder care, the issues that goes on to transferring our loved ones into facilities, and the pitfalls, I guess, if I could use that word, to illustrate the issues that occur in these facilities. And if you guys have any questions for Lisa, please ask. Put it on the chat, and I will read it off to her as the questions present themselves. Okay. So uh, I just want to ask this question, Lisa, to kick things off. During our initial conversation that we had together, you mentioned the phrase trauma, transfer trauma. Uh, Break down what that means.
Sure.
What does that refer to in transfer trauma?
Yeah. It's to usually someone who's more up there in years, more elderly. Every time they have a move, it's a shock to their system. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say someone's living in their home, all is, going well, they're managing. They go to a doctor's appointment. From there, they're hospitalized,
Mm,
3 nights in the hospital, bright lights, every people waking them up every 4 hours. They're very, very disoriented. A lot of times we call that hospital delirium. And now they're going off to a skilled nursing facility after 3 days. They might be there anywhere from maybe 7 to 10 days, maybe 14. And let's say they can't go back home and then they go to a senior living community where, let's say, I would move them into Sunrise Meadows. They've had a lot of changes within that short period of time, within a
mm,
30-day period.
mm.
So for them to be completely disoriented is actually very normal just because they don't know where they are. And oftentimes when we assess someone, we'll ask them what day of the week is it or what month is it. Um, on a good day, that's sometimes hard to answer
Yeah, yeah.
because they don't know what day it is
Mm,
because they've been moved around so much. And the place that they know now, home, is no longer reality for them. And
right.
I think it's critical that their loved ones have the proper conversations with them to talk about that transition of care.
Mm, mm. And that's really important. And I just want to illustrate this point to you. My mother, she uh, she came down with her dementia, and her mind was going off in different places, and you know she started looking at us like we were enemies. She forgot who we were. There were periods of time, Lisa, where I would go visit my mom, and she would ask me, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "What?" The first time she did that to me, Lisa, I thought she was joking. I'm like, I'm like, Mom, stop bullshitting me, Bob. You know what I'm saying? What are we doing? and she and she continued saying that I'm serious. I don't remember you. And we were already experiencing issues with my mother at the time, my siblings, but it wasn't until after that scenario that happened between her and I that I brought up to the family like, hey, uh, she's starting to not remember who the hell we are,
Mhm.
and she was starting to do bizarre things to herself, eat eat bizarre things, bizarre combinations of foods, and just talking about things that weren't there, but to her it was. And so we made the decision at that point to, she needs to go somewhere. The problem that we had initially was finding her a place to go that would admit her in, because not only was she dealing with dementia, she became very violent
Okay.
at times. But we were able to find her a place, and they treated her like the president of the United States. You
Wonderful.
know,
Wonderful.
so you know, our last year, maybe 2 years of her being there it was a blessing, because they saved us a lot of anguish, uh, tension, because like I said, my mom was a firecracker. And my oldest brother, before she was placed into a facility, he took care of her for a few years, and bless his heart, I don't know how he did it, but but yeah, there was a lot that went on in dealing with my mother, and I say all that to kind of send it off to you. Has there ever been any scenarios where people would bring their mom or their father who illustrated that type of behavior, and how was that handled?
Absolutely. And in the short time that, I have been with them, just under 6 months here, not so much with Sunrise Meadows. However, when I was a senior care advisor, those were typically the crisis situations. Those were the situations where family were at dire straits and they didn't know what to do. Or mom or dad got out of the house and they were walking around the neighborhood, and they may have had law enforcement involved at that point, and then they go to the hospital, and then we're trying to find a community, because even though there's a memory care community, not all communities can really handle some what we call, more of the behaviors. Some are better than others, and in that case I would say a dedicated memory care unit in that case would
Mm-hmm.
be the best, just because of the training of the caregivers. Caregivers typically in memory care communities, one or two of them are dementia care practitioners, and I always say they know how to go with the curve. And I do have residents that live with us at Sunrise Meadows that have dementia,
Mm-hmm.
and we go with whatever I say their perception is their reality, and I try to meet them with that, so I can get a glimpse into their world at that time, so we can go ahead and redirect.
Mm.
Um, Oftentimes, and I keep my office door open a lot, and I will have residents that stop in and visit me, and whatever world they are in that day, I join them with that. I never correct them. I never say, well, gosh, Bob, it's 2024 and, this is our president and this is where you live.
Hmm.
I just kind of go with the flow and
Right.
kind of get into their world and say, oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We have a gentleman who actually believes that he works there. And
Mm.
he thinks I'm some kind of dispatcher. So guess what? I'm the dispatcher that day.
Yeah.
And I go with it, and I make sure those moments for that person are quality,
Mm.
and we assess someone before they come in.
Hmm.
So before a family brings someone in, we actually assess them to make sure to find that appropriateness. But I've got to share with you a story. My very, very first assisted living position out in Cedarburg, it was actually winter of 2008. I had an adult son who literally drove up to our door. He was a primary caregiver for both of his parents.
Mm.
And he said, you know what? I can't do it anymore. White
Mm.
flag. I'm done. I can't.
Mm. Hmm.
And we actually made that admission happen very quickly. We normally don't do that,
Hmm.
but that moment stuck with me as long as I've been in senior care, because that's really that we know that caregiver had faced the most ultimate burnout possible. Um,
Mm.
in a, I always say, in a perfect world, right? In a perfect world, mom or dad would see changes, or the kids would talk, and they've had a family meeting. And as a former senior care advisor, I was actually invited to many of those meetings, and we would sit and talk, and we would discuss, what does a transition of care look like,
Mm.
and we're going to start and look at some communities, and I really want you to tour along with me and see which one is the best for you. We assess, we choose a move-in date, and then we begin that journey. And my idea of a perfect move-in is when someone has their apartment, the kids have already set that apartment up. The bedspread is on the bed, the Afghan is on the chair, either the TV or there's some music playing on the radio. Paperwork has been done beforehand if it's the activated power of attorney.
Hmm.
That resident walks in, and I introduce them to other residents, and they immediately start living their life. They're
Mm.
not seeing boxes unpacked. They're not seeing their what was their world from the other house to what now.
Okay.
Because thinking about transfer trauma, there are
Yes.
ways that we can minimize that.
Yeah.
There are ways that we can circumvent that
Yeah.
and make that as seamless as possible.
Mm.
Um, because a
Hmm.
movement like that really sets them up for success.
Awesome. Awesome. Because I remember when my mother was initially placed into her uh, facility, she would often ask us or me, because when I went out, most times I went by myself, but she would often ask me, so when am I going home? When am I going home? It's like, you are. you know, I didn't want to lie to my mother and tell her that, when you get better, I had to keep it real with her. I'm like, this is home. Well, I want to go home. Like that chapter doesn't exist anymore. Uh, as heartbreaking as that was, I had to be truthful. I couldn't, I couldn't sugarcoat that, right?
Nope.
Uh, and she didn't like my answer, but I think somewhere deep down inside, she respected it, right? I would like to think that.
Yeah.
So, um, And I want to talk about that that piece where you mentioned about when how you communicate to people, that it does make a difference. It really does, because I had to go along with the program with my mother too, and it ended really good, to be quite honest. You know, I had to say, yeah, yeah, this is a nice day today, even though it's raining outside. It's like, okay, it's nice, whatever. I like you said, we just learned to go with it, and uh, I just have memories of just uh, going with it, and the pleasure that I saw her express was it spoke volumes. It really did. Um, because like I said, my mom could be a firecracker, but as long as you just, as long as you just stayed in your own lane, go with the flow, let her get whatever she had in her head out. I mean, it turned out to be a positive visit, right? Um,
It's important.
it
Um,
is.
the parent is always still the parent, and I think we need to remember that. And I oftentimes see adult kids talk at their parents and talk down to them. And I like to believe that when my parents were alive, I had meaningful conversations with them, but I talked with them. Um, and I think the difference between your mom and like my father, when I shared with you, had spent the last
Yeah,
6 months of his life
yeah.
in skilled care, he actually was still alert and oriented
Mm,
and on hospice. And he was like, well, I don't understand why the woman across the street can have home hospice services and she can live at home and I can't. And I tried to explain to him that your needs are so different. And if you were to be at home with home health care, it would cost close to $20,000
mm,
a month. And that's a lot of money.
sure,
And
sure.
what people don't understand is if you spend that money at home and you're doing that and you live long enough and you won't live those funds, now you're looking at a community that will be able to take Medicaid first dollar when they walk through the door. There aren't very many of them. And
Hmm.
if they exist, sometimes they're not very nice.
No,
So
yeah.
those are the hard conversations that we need to have with people. And those are the very conversations that I had with my father saying, look, with everything you have going on right now, it's, home doesn't make sense. It just doesn't from, a financial viability standpoint. Um, but it's also, I think, to unpack what happens with their belongings, especially if they are alert and oriented.
Hmm.
That is really, really emotional for people
Hmm.
because what happened to that one yearbook underneath my bed, or I want my brother to have this, or I want someone else to have this, and a financial power of attorney. As soon as that form is filled out, a lot of people don't understand it gives that agent immediate power to be able to sell things, sell the house and whatnot.
Hmm.
Now, if that individual is alert and oriented, it's best to have a conversation with them to say, look, you know what, care costs money. This is where we are. This is what it costs to stay in this community. For us to be able to pay for that, we're preparing to sell the home because at this point in juncture with your physical situation, we're needing to do this. So
Hmm.
is there anything before we get started? Is there anything that you want to go to someone? If possible, if you can get someone back to their house,
Hmm.
that's ideal, but sometimes you can't if they're bedridden. So you need to have that conversation. Give them that dignity. Give them that respect because there's nothing worse than someone being bedbound in a skilled nursing room, worrying and losing control about what's happening to their belongings. And I've seen it time and time again as an advisor, and it's it's heartbreaking, really. It just is.
Mm, mhm. Uh, you talked about two things that I want to bring up. You talked about burnout. You talked about finances. Let's talk about finances for a second. What? How does finances factor into? And this question isn't relegated to where you work. This is a general question about finances. How big of a factor does finances play into having someone being transferred into a positive or a well established facility?
They play a big part. They really do. Many of the communities that are in the greater area are looking at having someone be able to pay privately for a minimum of 2 years, sometimes 3 years.
Mm,
Let's say that is, let's say that room and board cost or that service cost is anywhere from, let's say, $8,000 a month, and you do the math, that's that's quite a bit of money that they need to save.
hmm
Um, Now, what I do is I take a look, or I used to when I was an advisor, I took a look at what approximately that monthly cost would be. I would take a look at their income. I would dig deep. I would see if they served in the armed services during a wartime period, because there are benefits to be had there too,
Sure,
or if someone is a surviving spouse.
sure.
So at that point in that discovery, it's about turning every stone over to
Mm,
see how long they can privately pay, and then find out from there, what are your requirements? And then the other important thing to ask is, once my loved one spends their money at your community, are they going to stay there and convert to Medicaid? Or do you only have maybe 5%, 10% of your entire uh, occupancy that you allow for that? So,
hmm
what is
hmm
my likelihood that I give you my last dollar that I'm going to be able to stay there? That's very important. And I used to ask that all the time as an
mm.
advisor, because there's nothing more traumatic than having someone spend all of their money and then find out that they're not able to stay.
So where will they go?
They would go to a Medicaid first community. That could be
So
skilled
what?
nursing, that could be an assisted living that's known to take Medicaid. And not all of them are bad. I've spent many years in the nonprofit sector. In one of the communities I worked at was on the south side of Milwaukee. I would often admit someone first dollar Medicaid. That was our mission statement: solidarity with the poor.
hmm
But yet, those are far and few between.
mm. So would the quality of care be different from a private pay to a Medicaid?
Not always, no. The quality of care depends on the overall administration. Um, I have seen the biggest hearts and sometimes some of the most, you know, Medicaid run communities. It's not the style of the community. And when I was a senior care advisor, I was always famous for saying that the chandelier does not answer the call light.
Mm, mm.
Um, who
Okay.
who answers call lights? People do. And the better our caregivers are, the better they're treated. They're going to answer those call lights with compassion, with empathy, and be able to do that day in and day out.
Hmm.
Um, and that's really what matters.
Okay. Okay.
But with Medicaid, though, I will say that they don't pay dollar for dollar that private pay communities do. So some of those private pay communities have the ability to pay some of those caregivers more to bring in maybe better, entertainment, to be able to maybe have outings or whatnot. So it does make some difference,
Mm,
but at the end of the day, it's it's leadership, and it's also how um, caregivers are received. They're the golden egg. They just really are,
mhm,
coming in, day out, taking care of your loved ones,
mm.
making sure that they're attended to. And I think that we need to recognize that.
Indeed, indeed. I have I have a comment and I have two questions.
Okay.
The comment is will lead to the question about burnout.
Shoot.
My wife Gabrielle says this: we're unfortunately the sandwich generation. We're in the position of taking care of our parents and raising our children. So it's a twofold issue. I can see why people would burn out. The question for you: how big of an issue is worker burnout?
It's real.
Yeah.
People, and especially through the last 4 years, um, through COVID, workout worker burnout is very real. People do not stay in that profession as long as they used to, and I think that turnover is very relevant. So it is. It's about taking care of the caregiver and having that person in that role be very cognizant on what do they need to do to take care of themselves. You
Hmm.
can't you can't pour from an empty cup. You just can't.
No, no. Yeah.
And I see, you know, people in healthcare positions that have left altogether,
Mm.
and they're sometimes very happy working in furniture stores and selling sofas because it's not the, oh my gosh, who's going to come in tonight? Who's doing this? So it's a lot different than it used to be. And I think that healthcare has changed. And like I said in the beginning, I've worked in assisted living now or some type of senior care for 17 years. I started this journey in 2007, and it's changed a lot. And also, what attributes to burnout is the level of care and the acuity that comes through our doors.
That,
That has
yes.
changed significantly. Um,
Hmm.
Milwaukee area precisely, especially on the north side, they have had a number of skilled nursing facilities that have actually closed down. And so some of those folks were rehomed into the community-based residential facility, the higher level of care.
Mm.
And 20 years ago, you probably did not have anyone in assisted living that needed a mechanical lift. And now I see that as a commonplace. We have
Really?
more amputations. We have more people that aren't weight bearing. And now in assisted livings,
Mm.
we're getting into that position of two-person transfers. If you
Wow.
have three, four of those on the same floor, that is going to, have a higher, burnout. I think it's just really for the people, and even me included. And I will share this. I just had a LinkedIn post last Monday, and I kind of encapsulated my entire year. And I spoke very freely about being senior care advisor and just how burnt out I was and
Mm.
what I needed to do to
Hmm.
kind of really recreate myself. So for
Wow.
the person at home, knowing that that is, but also keep in mind that if you're listening right now when you're at home, keep in mind that there are three different shifts of people that are doing what you're trying to do by yourself right now.
Mm. Now you got me thinking.
Okay.
uh, it, you got me thinking that there's a lot of people that never really took care of themselves from a physical standpoint. So now they're older, they're heavier, they're practically unable to care for themselves in this day and age. Whereas back then, you didn't have certain devices to assist people in doing things. I don't know if you can answer this, but where did where did all this come from? I mean, where did all the unhealthiness, where did all this start?
I would probably say a lot of it's our food supply and our lifestyle. We're more sedentary than we ever have been in our lives,
Mm,
just by our computers and our
mm,
devices.
mm-hmm.
Probably years back, even 30 years ago, people didn't bring their laptops home with them. They went home from work and they took a walk and they walked the family dog and
Yeah.
they were a lot more active.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are so connected to our devices, whether it be a phone or be a laptop, where instead of going home and taking a walk around the lake or a walk in the park, we're, as soon as we unpack our bag, we have our laptop on our kitchen table, making sure we don't miss an email. So a lot of that is stress, but a lot of it is because we don't have that time to prepare good foods and whatnot. It's our lifestyle, which now that shortens our lifespan, but it also compromises the years that we have left. No, and that's
Correct. Correct.
huge. And
Correct.
I'm actually very careful now. When I worked at home, I would, oh my goodness, sometimes I would send an email at 10 o'clock at night to a provider saying, oh my gosh, do you have availability? Can I tour tomorrow?
Mm,
And many times I keep my laptop, actually, I keep it at work on my desk. I think it's important for workers, no matter what their role is in healthcare, to have a good exercise regimen, have a good hydration regimen, and have nutrition, and to really take care of themselves.
mm-hmm.
Because if they don't, it's it can add up, because there's sometimes a lot of stress.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm very mindful of keeping and taking care of myself, so I have that energy and I have that disposition to
Mm-hmm.
be able to talk with a resident.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not burnt out, I'm not tired,
Mm-hmm.
because I know I'm doing, the proper nutrition, exercise, hydration. And when they come to me, I'm putting my best foot forward for them.
Indeed. And to piggyback our conversation about being sedentary, my wife says this: kids don't play outdoors anymore, so parents are also in the house more. We don't move like we used to, which is evident from what you said from back in the day. People were more active, people were doing things, had more physical labor jobs. We walked our dogs. I mean, we did things, and now we're sitting here
Hmm.
looking at an electronic device. This is their job. And she also says that our food is processed and full of chemicals that makes us fat.
Correct. And I agree. That is so true.
Hmm.
And the amount of processed food that we eat, and just we're
Hmm.
on the go, a lot of people eat fast food. And I remember seeing a meme, and it said if we would replace all of the fast food restaurants with farmers markets, just think how healthy we would be.
Mm. Mm-mm-mm. You know, my 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 father, he was in a home for a while before he passed, and I'm gonna tell you something, Lisa. His eating habits were horrible. Bless his heart. He had very, very horrible eating habits. He loved he loves soul food. Um, and he didn't like the food at the facilities because he labeled it as hospital food.
Mhm.
Uh, it didn't have any seasoning, or it just didn't have the oomph like like we would make our food.
Sure.
But I remember having conversations with him, and I just had to tell him, like, look, this food that you're eating is healthier food. And yeah, it our what we eat does really play a role into our health, right? And not
Mm.
just our physical health, it's the things that we do. It can affect our mental health as well. So we really, and I'm talking to everybody that's listening, we really
Sure,
have to
absolutely.
stay active, uh, read, go to the gym, uh, meditate, do whatever needs to be done to train your brain to be better, right? Because once you reach a certain point in your life where you cannot, you know, make that happen, I mean, it's over. But you can prolong the inevitable from happening by taking care of yourself and taking care of not only your physical health, but your mental health. And I can only assume that you, Lisa, have experienced quite a bit of mental health issues in senior
I
living.
have seen a lot, and sitting in my other room in my living room is a Bowflex Max trainer. I have exercise equipment at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have any excuses. I can't pull any punches because
Mm-hmm.
it's right there. After starting at Sunrise Meadows, I for a short period, a 6-month period, hired a trainer for 2 days a week to work on strength.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important because food is medicine. If you look at it, if we all broke it down and ate properly, um, we would prevent a lot of the pharmaceuticals that we would need to take.
Ooh, say that louder. Say that louder. Oh my
I
goodness.
will say that again. And just because when I do the admission, I'm the one who looks at the med list before I give it to the nurse or the wellness director. And I kind of take a head count on how many medications someone's on. Oftentimes, when people come into senior living communities, they're in 15, 20 medications.
Mm,
And they could be in their 60s, they could be in their 70s. And while we're talking about that, we're seeing younger and younger people needing to go into communities as well. Life changes, self care. And in the same breath, though, I have seen 97, 98, 99-year olds
mhm,
on maybe a baby aspirin or
mm,
maybe one med, and I'm like, that's why they're 97, 98, 99 years old, because they're not taking a fistful of meds either. And it really has to, it speaks to the person who is the sandwich generation because they are facing the ultimate stress. They're kind of getting the 1-2 punch, right? So they're getting the
mm,
parent who's elderly, they're getting the kids who need to go to soccer, need to, a ride here, a ride there. And sometimes they even have needs of their own. So now this adult person who's trying to raise their children to the best of their ability is now often trying to figure out what they're going to do with mom and dad. And often that comes with a crisis, it comes with a phone call. Either mom or dad fell or they went to an appointment and now they're in the hospital. And when I talked about that transfer trauma,
mm,
everything happens so very fast.
mhm,
And when people sit in front of me, when they're in my office telling me their stories, I know that skilled nursing is only going to keep them so long, and we have to act fast. So for all that to happen,
Hmm.
that's a lot of stress on that person.
Indeed. Indeed. I have two questions from the same person here on the chat
Sure.
that I'm I'm going to ask you. One, what is the hardest thing you had to do on your job? Have
I
to do.
would say learn how to grieve and keep a calm face for the family. That was the hardest thing, and that does not get easier.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
I tell families that I understand grief as a professional in senior living, but also as an adult daughter that has lost both parents. So that's still that's the hardest.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah. Yeah. And which is great that we're having this conversation, Lisa, because this is a very very sensitive
Sure.
conversation for both of us, I guess,
Yeah,
because you know it can never not be raw, if that makes any sense to you.
it does.
It can never not be uh unnerving, or unemotional, where we talk about the people that raised us, and
Correct.
and to see them grow from these statuesque strong figures to frail forgetful people. I mean,
No, it is. And I'll share with you that, um, my first day at Sunrise Meadows is the day my dad took his last breath. And I shared that with you when we sat down.
mhm,
And I had taken time off before from the other position. And sometimes, as a healthcare being in that realm, I make the mistake and think that I can suck it up
yeah,
and I got it and I don't need to take any time off and
yeah,
I'll just put my big girl pants on and just do it and push
no.
through and so that's what I did. And there was a gentleman that lived with us. He wasn't with us very long. He,
Mm,
in fact, was with us less than 2 months. And I remember very, very vividly when his hospice provider was sharing with me in our lobby that he was actively passing. And like, boom, it brought me back to the hallway of my dad's skilled nursing facility. And I remember I'm like, I went in my office, I closed my door, and I'm
yeah.
like, literally started crying. I'm like, oh my gosh. But
Oh my God.
that was my release because I hadn't, and I
Mm,
think my husband's like, you haven't had a good cry yet.
mm,
I haven't
mm-mm.
heard that. I haven't, and I think I don't know if he was getting worried, but he knows me.
Yeah,
And it wasn't there yet. It was there that day.
yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, this is what I need, but I can share with you that I actually have given presentations because I like to speak publicly. One of my presentations is actually pushing through grief.
Mm,
And it talks to people about what that looks like and whether it's a month, a year, 5 years, it comes in waves and different people grieve in different ways.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so I think that for me, where I am right now at Sunrise Meadows, I think that is something a gift I can give to the families is really help them grieve.
Yeah. And what do you enjoy about your job?
The residents, I do. I really like people, but I like providing that level of service for our residents. I'll share a story this past August. We celebrated State Fair Week at Sunrise Meadows. And we really, with our setup, couldn't bring a bunch of residents to State Fair. That's not our setup. So I
Mm,
wanted to bring State Fair to them.
Mm, okay.
So I went to Menards this summer. I spray painted a big piece of lumber, and one of my residents helped me draw lines on it. And I created a like a horse racing game. And just the smiles on their faces and just jumping on the floor and doing that, it makes everything worthwhile. And the second part of it is when someone comes to move in their very first day and they're afraid and they're a little bit scared, they walk in their apartment, and when everything is in its place, you just kind of see the smile on their face. They're like, you know what? It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be all right.
Yeah.
And that's why I like to be present the
Mm,
day someone moves in, because I'm very hands on. And it's almost like a concierge, kind of welcoming them in. And granted, I spent over 10 years in the or the hotel industry, so apparently that will never leave me. But it's just that sense of welcoming someone and walking them through and
mm,
just seeing them blossom
yeah.
as each day goes by,
Yeah.
knowing that they've made our community their home. So those are some of my favorite parts.
Nice. Nice. I want to talk about social activities.
Sure.
What social activities do you guys do at Sunrise Meadows?
Sure, great question. And we have a newer activities person. Everything from conversation in the morning, like a topic of the day. We usually have an exercise video in the morning.
Okay.
It's called Metro Exercise, and it's more of a seated position. We're not making
Oh,
anyone do jumping
well,
jacks or burpees.
got it.
Um, we do a lot
Yeah.
of art. And if anyone wants to take a look at it, if they look at Sunrise Meadows on Facebook, they can see, because I'm the person who does our social media,
That's what's
and they can see all the different things. But we had a petting zoo that came in this summer with some goats and a
nice.
chick. We have word games, and there's a lot of art,
Mm,
and even some like, you know, activities that are involving food. And, we have happy hour, but it's not alcoholic happy hour. We call them mocktails just because of all the medications people are on.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
probably not good practice to involve alcohol at that point in time. So we still have fun though.
Okay. Okay. Uh, now I'm going to ask a question about uh, mortality and COVID-19.
Sure.
Uh, how serious of an issue was it for you to deal with residents and or staff losing their lives during COVID-19?
At that point, I was a new advisor. I had just started my position as a senior care advisor like 3 months beforehand. But
Right.
I will never forget the day I went to 4 or 5 skilled nursing facilities, and it said on the door, by the order of Tony Evers, no one is allowed to come in. So, how that changed was the way we did tours. Loved ones at first could not visit their parent. They had to leave furniture in the loading dock, and the staff would set their room up, and they would see them through a window
Mm,
and try to, and especially if you're hard of hearing, that's really hard. Um, with staff, that's where a lot of the burnout came, because people were
mhm,
working not only 8-hour shifts, sometimes 16, because there were
yeah.
some
Yeah.
caregivers that were fearful because they have compromised loved ones at home, whether it be a child, a spouse, um, a parent of their own, that they didn't want to bring that home. So there's been a lot of attrition from that as well.
Hmm. Okay.
So
Okay.
I think it did impact people quite a bit because there were only a few skilled nursing facilities
Hmm.
that would have taken a COVID positive person. And with that, they could have tested positive for a month, sometimes 2 months.
Yeah.
And they may have been, you know, not have symptoms, but the assisted living would not take them. And the assisted living required individuals to have a negative COVID test
Okay.
before even coming in. So that was, as back then, a senior care advisor, that was serious business. Yeah,
Very, very much so. Because a lot of people lost their lives, man. You know,
they did.
lives.
And I would also say that also losing lives from COVID, they also lost lives from loneliness too. I think we learned a lot with
Mm,
that period of time because now, and I've haven't been there while we've had a positive resident case, but at that point we just literally we mask up, but people can still visit, their loved ones can still visit, so we're not isolating them anymore.
yeah.
We're not
Yeah.
saying no, no one's allowed in. This state won't let us do that anymore. So I think they learned a lot from that.
Hmm.
But there's so much that people really need that contact. People need to really sit and visit with one another. We are social
Yes,
beings.
we are.
And we really, really need to make sure that what we did in 2020, that part of it doesn't repeat again, just because people need that contact.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Uh, thank you for that answer. Uh, how prevalent was elder abuse or is elder abuse?
Not so much in, assisted living because people need jobs. I would say elder abuse, I worked it on the backside from being an advisor and working those, I call those cases from adult protective services that someone needed to be placed because their loved one was either financially, you know, abusing them or they were neglecting them. But I think caregiver neglect from like from a community standpoint, that person working needs to understand that if they do that, they will not be able to work anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a pretty serious ramification for that. And
Sure.
there's a difference between, I'm just, not going to do this or whatnot. Someone would have to be pretty silly to be able to go into a community and, think they can do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm, very fortunate where we are, and even the communities that I worked at over the years, not to have really had to deal with that.
Good.
You are going to see in the news that sometimes that happens, right? It just does.
Yeah.
And that's just having a close tab on your residents and caregivers and just setting that culture that doesn't happen here.
Hmm. Now, you, we're on the same vein, but talk to me about, well, talk to us
Hmm.
about the National CNA Registry because you put me on to some interesting
Hmm.
information, and I want you to go over that again because I don't think people know how deep this thing is when it comes to uh, CNAs not doing what they're supposed to do, or getting involved in uh, stealing or elder abuse. You know.
Well, correct. I mean, that's serious, and that is something they have to apply for every year. And they have to, that's serious. They are a caregiver. And for some reason, if you are found or caught of some kind of abuse, either financial, physical, um, you're not going to be able to work again.
Hmm.
in that state.
Hmm.
It behooves a community and to be able to do that's why they do background checks. That's why they check and to make sure that there isn't anything in their history as far as what kind of care or care they didn't do. So that's you have to have that. We have to, by the state of Wisconsin, we
Hmm.
have to run a background check.
Hmm. And if
And
you
then
find during your check that they were let go from a job because of something financial or physical, then it's a
no
pretty
go.
much a no-go.
No go. And we can also take a look too. And caregivers are hard to come by. They just are. And I think COVID changed a lot of that as well. But I've got to say that people, they I wish that we had the time of our lives where people would stay at a caregiving job for 10, 20 years. And there are some communities out there that you have that longevity. I'd really like to go back to that
Hmm.
and have someone, at least start there. And the reason why they walk through the door is because of the residents. And I can tell you, I'm pretty encouraged. I started a newsletter in July of this year, and that's something I wanted to do.
Okay.
And I have an employee spotlight and I have a resident highlight called Wisdom of the Ages. And every time I have asked one of our resident um, care assistants,
Hmm.
what is the most or what do you like most about working with us? And they say the residents. So their hearts are in the right places.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think that some people just, you know, they get lost. Not everyone's a caregiver. And I think they find that out pretty quickly that
Mm.
there's a lot. We take care of people in the most vulnerable points of their lives. And we need to make sure we're doing that right.
Yeah, we do. We do.
It is an honor and a privilege to walk through the door every day and take care of people that have lived many more years than me.
Mm.
Stories, their wisdom, and no matter what they have going on, whether
Hmm.
it's cognitive, whether it's physical, whether it's been past addiction, whatever it is, they're in this point in time with us. And it's an obligation to really treat them as people, have conversations with them,
Yeah.
dementia or not, just have those conversations and make it as natural as possible. Adults, residents don't like to be talked to like babies. They like to be treated as adults. And we, that's what I do.
Mm. You, you know, this this has been a learning lesson for me, to learn more in depth about what goes on, uh, from your perspective with facilities that work and care for uh, the elderly population, to be blunt. And not only that, Lisa, uh, I think that this is a conversation that needed to happen because I don't think people understand the depths of how good work you guys do, the work that you guys commit yourselves to doing to care for people who can't care for themselves, right? You're dealing with people who have dementia. You're dealing with people who are overweight, unfortunately, and they can't take care of themselves physically. You're dealing with death, not necessarily on a daily basis, but you are dealing with that. You guys are the front line for caring for our elders, and uh, you know, I thank you, Lisa, for the work that you do, and I think you know, the company that you work for doing what you guys do, because if we didn't have good companies or organizations, facilities like yours that are out there doing the work, loving what you guys do, and making sure that our loved ones are cared for in the best way possible, I don't know what state of being we would be in, in terms of the care that our mothers and fathers are receiving. I mean, I just don't. I think that things would be a bit crappier, to say the least. And
I
uh,
do, and thank you, and I give so many kudos to the hands-on caregivers that work with our residents. And there's a reason why I say I wanted to get back in the bullpen again from advising to go back to assisted living
hmm,
to be part of that solution again.
yeah,
And thank you for having me on your podcast. It's really meant a lot to me just to share with people,
yeah,
that assisted living communities, we do wonderful work every day, and we make a difference in the lives of vulnerable and aging people every single day.
amen. Keep doing the work, Lisa.
Thank you.
Keep doing the work. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mark Ross, and this has been another episode of the Speak Your Truth with Mark Ross. Remember, everyone, self-care is important. So make sure that your mental and your physical health, make that a priority every day first. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, good night, and good night to you, Miss Lisa Richardson.
Thank you.
All right, take care now.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.